Hello again. We're going to look at the respiratory system now. So we're going to start with the larynx, and this is located in the anterior midline of the neck. It is just anterior to the esophagus. And the function here is to conduct air into the lower respiratory tract and close off the airway when you are swallowing. And this is what we commonly call the voice box. You can see it here. We've got some of the esophagus and cartilages attached down here, so it's mainly this portion right in here. And if you look at the diagram of the alimentary canal, if we come across that again, I will show you, but you can kind of see this structure outlined like that as you're going through, looking down below, of course, the mandible. So in the larynx, we have the epiglottis, and this is a flap of cartilage that closes the laryngeal inlet during swallowing and prevents the passage of food and liquid to go into the lungs, which is what we call aspiration. And we have all had something happen where we maybe actually swallowed something and it went the wrong way. So having this closed is important. It also can keep you, of course, from aspirating and getting sick from that or choking. We have several cartilages that each kind of have their own name in the larynx. The arytenoid cartilage is a small three-sided pyramid-shaped structure, and it helps form part of the larynx. This is where the vocal cords attach, and it allows and aids in vocal cord movement. So these are very important. Here we have the corniculate cartilage, and my arrow is pointing to 33. Look at where that arrow is pointing. These are very small nodules of elastic cartilage here, okay? And these actually articulate with the arytenoid cartilage. Then we have the cuneiform cartilage, and you can see these are a little more wedge-shaped here. They're a little easier to see on this picture. They sit on top and move with the arytenoids as well. So the thyroid cartilage is much larger. You can see it from the front here. Takes the shape of the thyroid. It's more narrow when you're looking at it from the side. It sits in the front of the larynx and above, excuse me, the thyroid gland. It's made of two halves which meet in the middle here at the peak, and that's actually called the laryngeal prominence. And this is actually what we call the Adam's apple in men, right? The cricoid cartilage is next, and this is a ring of cartilage here. This will go all the way around, okay? And so it completely surrounds the trachea, and it's the only complete ring of cartilage around the trachea. You can see here, this is a cutout portion, but these are the portions where it goes around, but this would be solid going all the way around. And so we have some folds here, and these are going to be the false vocal cords and the true vocal cords. The false vocal cords, sometimes called the ventricular fold or vestibular, is a fold of mucous membrane that covers a muscle in the larynx. This separates the ventricles of the larynx from the vestibule of the larynx. The true vocal cords or vocal folds are a pair of thick mucous membranes that protect. These guys are key in creating sound through vocalization. So we need this to speak along with the muscles. So the size of the vocal cords actually is what affects the pitch of your voice. Next here we have the carina, and this is the first ring of cartilage that is in the trachea. So this sits between the divisions of the two main bronchi. All right, so next we have our bronchi, and that would be the whole structure here. This is all bronchi on both sides. We have right and left lobes. It is plural for bronchus, and this is the passageway that leads into the lungs. And so the widest segment here is going to be the primary. We have a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. So once it splits right here, we have secondary, and then when it splits again, we have tertiary. Now, these little branches would be tertiary here, primary, and then secondary. And then when they split off again, right here, there's your tertiary. So you have to look at these carefully because sometimes they look different in different models. All right, so here's our secondary, sometimes called the lobar bronchi here, where they first begin to narrow and branch off. Lastly, we have our tertiary, and as I said, in different models, they look differently. This model does look a little bit more, this picture looks a little bit more like these models, and so these are the little tiny branches, sometimes called segmental bronchi. All right, and then those are going to go on down into respiratory bronchioles. Bronchioles narrow until they reach the terminal bronchioles, which will then reach the respiratory bronchioles. All right, and so that's kind of some technical names for different areas of the bronchioles. So these are going to divide into about 2 to 11 alveolar ducts, and each of those ducts will have 5 to 6 alveolar sacs, which you can see here in the picture on the left. And so this is the basic unit of gas exchange. And so each of these little bumps here, these are the little alveolar sacs, and so they contain the alveoli. And this is where your carbon dioxide leaves and your oxygen enters. And so that's what this little white stuff is representing here. Lastly, we have pleura, which is going to be a sac surrounding each lung. The visceral pleura, and I'm going to ask you on the exam, it's very hard to note exactly where we are talking about. So on the exam, you can just say pleura. You don't have to tell me if it is going to be visceral or parietal, but I wanted to go over that. So visceral pleura is going to be lining the actual surface of the lung. Remember, visceral is going to be the innermost layer. We also have a pulmonary pleura, and that surrounds each lung and attaches to the thoracic cavity. Now, this model does not have it labeled, so it's hard to know if they're trying to represent that with the white portion or the brown portion. So that's one of the reasons I'm not going to have you label it there. But the pulmonary pleura, remember, is going to surround each lung and attach to the thoracic cavity. And then the parietal pleura is going to be the outer membrane attached to the inner surface of the thoracic cavity. So that may be, actually I would say, looking a little closer, perhaps we could call that pulmonary pleura and then this parietal pleura. But for your lab exam, I'm going to simplify it. I just want you to tell me pleura. But you do need to know for lecture that we have the three and be able to define those.